We are the Necrotizing Fasciitis Foundation, also known as the NFF. Our mission is to advocate and spread awareness of necrotizing fasciitis, a rapidly spreading bacterial infection that can destroy skin, fat, tissue, and muscle, not to mention lives. For this reason, it is often referred to as the flesh-eating disease or flesh-eating bacteria. To contribute or participate in our cause, or for more information, please visit our website at www.necfasc.org.
Hello and welcome everyone to another episode of The Steep. I'll be your host, Tim Hayden. Our guest on this episode is Jen Garmon. Jen's from Tennessee and is a necrotizing fasciitis survivor. She's here to talk about her experience. Let's add Jen to the show. Hi, Jen. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing great. So you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. My name's Jen. Nice to be here. I am 42. I am single, never married, no children. Super proud for a mama of a little Dachshund Schnauzer mix Jackson. And I claim my mom's dog. Her name's Ellie. Super proud aunt of two amazing nieces, Ruby and Catherine. And I love to eat, but I love to cook. And I'm excited to be here.
I also like to eat and cook as well. You can't see it. You see me from the chest up. So, Jen, how did your experience begin? When did it begin?
I started not feeling great like the first week of February, but I don't think it was very related. I just had like a nagging cough and a headache, and I just kind of felt yuck. But going into the second week of February 2020, I just got to feeling like I didn't have much of an appetite. And about the same time, I noticed a knot that came up on the lower left side of my labia in the area of my lady bits leading to my left thigh. Well, I've got T-Rex arms, so I couldn't really, play around with it or anything. Not that you want to, which was probably a good thing, knowing now what I know. It didn't hurt, though. It just felt like a knot. It kind of felt like, if I had to describe it, it felt like somebody had cut half a grape and just stuck it under my skin. So I wasn't too worried about it. I thought, well, it doesn't seem to be a bull because I've had those before once in a while. And, those are like painful and tender and all that stuff. And it was just there for a couple days. And then about the 13th, it started to get bigger and it started to feel tender. And I thought, oh, well, maybe it is something other than like a cyst or just a knot. And I probably should have acted on the 13th, but I'm the type of person that I just avoid doctors like the plague. And I just thought it'll be okay. It'll work itself out. But between the 13th and the 14th, it was like it became super angry and everything started to swell and I couldn't get comfortable. The whole day, the 14th, I couldn't get comfortable at all. I was just like, what is going on? And I had this feeling like I didn't have a temperature. I didn't have an upset stomach or anything, but I kind of had this feeling like the lights are on, but nobody's home. I knew something wasn't quite right, but I didn't feel sick per se. Well, the night of the 14th of February 2020, I could not get comfortable. I felt like everything was like 10 times its normal size. I just couldn't get any position that felt comfortable. And by this point, it really hurt to even use the restroom. So I didn't sleep at all. I get up on the 15th and I think, well, I'll take a shower because, we think, oh, shower fixes everything. I'll be good as new. Well, by this time, I couldn't even barely stand to wash. It had gotten super inflamed and tender. And like I said, I've got T-Rex arms and I'm a big girl. So where it was at, I couldn't really, play around down there. And I live with my mother, thank goodness. Because I had somebody to weigh in and talk some sense into me. But I got out of the shower and I'm like, Mom, I think something is not right here. I need you to look. And so she looks, and as soon as she looks, she's like, Jen, you've got to go to a doctor. You have a dark red line going all the way up from, the bottom of the lower left labia up to the top going around. And I'm normally like, no, I'm not going to the doctor. I'm not going to the doctor. But something, like, I didn't even put up a fight. I said, okay. Because she said it's burning up hot to the touch. So the September prior, my mom had actually fallen and broken her arm in 2 places, and she still wasn't able to drive a vehicle. So I drive myself to urgent care, and they check me in and take me back. And the urgent care doctor, as soon as she looked, she says, honey, I cannot treat you here. You have to go to the ER. My mom says, well, can't you just give her some antibiotics? And she said, no, she's got the type of infection that kills people. I can tell that by looking at it. She needs, definitely needs IV antibiotics minimum, and she might even need surgery. And I'm just like, again, I've got this feeling of like the lights are on, but nobody's home. So I'm hearing what she's saying, but it's just not registering, I guess. And so my mom said, you're sure you can't just give her something here? And she's like, no. She's like, she could die. And she said she needs to go to the urgent care. I meant the emergency room. Right. So the doctor gets like eye level with me, and she says, listen, I need you to drive from here to the emergency room. No stops for anything. And I said, okay. And she's like, no, do you understand that I need you to leave here and go straight to the emergency room? She said, not to go home, not to stop for a drink, nothing. And I got it. I was like, okay, I get it. And so I follow her orders and I leave there, and she said, we're going to call the emergency room and let them know you're coming. So I'm like, well, that's nice. But I still wasn't, I'm thinking, okay, well, maybe it's a bull and it's infected and they're just going to cut it. And, I'd never had to do that before, but I'd heard of people. So I just thought, okay, well, maybe they're just going to lance it or drain it or whatever. It'll be no problem. So I go to the emergency room, and you know how it is when you go to the emergency room. You're like there, and you fill out all the paperwork, and then you wait, and you wait, and you wait, and you wait some more, and then somebody gives birth, and then you wait some more. Well, that was not the case at all. We got through with our the admission, and it wasn't even 5 minutes, and they were coming and getting me, and I'm like, that's kind of weird. So I get into the emergency room, and as soon as they look at it, it's like blood work, all the lines. It's kind of like, whoa, because there are people in and out, nurses looking, they get the on-call doctor. Then the next thing there's another doctor taking a look, and they're asking me questions. So I give them the whole story, like I just told you, leading up to how we got there. And they're like, we need to send you for a chest x-ray, a CT scan. And I'm like, it's a bump. Why? And by this point, I'm getting a little more like, it's like myself looking in on the situation instead of me actually living it, not realizing it's because infections running through my body like crazy. And so, it's doctor in, doctor out, blood work, tubes and tubes of blood, go for the CT scan, go for the chest x-ray, do all that. And it's like, normally I've never been in the hospital except when I was like in middle school and had to have a tonsillectomy, but I've been there with like my mom or somebody else, and you're like, you wait and you wait and you wait. And I just thought it was odd how urgent everybody was acting. And I'm like, is it because they're not busy? Like, I don't know. Is it slow Saturday? I don't know. Finally, they start coming in and talking, and they're like, we see gas bubbles on your CT scan, and we have reason to believe you have necrotizing fasciitis. And I was like, what? I don't know what that means. What? That's like a $27 word. What does that mean? And they're like, it's flesh-eating bacteria. And I actually laughed. I looked at my mom and I laughed. And I'm like, what? Is that a real thing? Like, that's whatever. That's what you hear in the tabloids. That's like horror movie stuff. What are you talking about? They're like, no, it's a real thing, and we've got good reason to believe that you've got it. And I'm like, you hear something like that, and you're like, it's not that. You're just, come on, get real. Somebody's playing a joke on me, right?
Right.
And then I'm thinking, okay, well, if I do have it, it can't be that bad. I mean, you see about it on TV, but that's just amped up for, TV. And they're like, we're going to have to go in and see, exactly what we're working with, but we feel very confident that you've got it. And I'm like, okay. So a couple more doctors are coming in, and they didn't know exactly where to cut me because there wasn't a visual, like it wasn't an open wound at that point. There was nothing like oozing out or any like head like you would have on a pimple or something like that, because at this point everything was so swollen and inflamed. So finally, and it wasn't like it took that long, but all the people in and out, an OBGYN surgeon comes in and introduces herself and says, I'm the doctor that's going to be doing your surgery. And I'm like, oh, I have to have surgery? And she's like, yeah, we got to take you to emergency surgery. And the last thing she said before they take me off to pre-op is, I'm going to try to keep your incision as small as possible. Well, that's when I was like, that got my attention. I'm like, what do you mean try to keep it as small as possible? I mean, it's down there's not that much you can cut, And, but of course, this is the mind of somebody completely ignorant to what necrotizing fasciitis is. No idea about tunneling and all that fun stuff you go to learn about. So I looked at my mom and I had this overwhelming sense of calm. I'm just like, Mom, I love you. I'm good with God. And, I had that talk that some people need to have so that their loved one isn't worried about them being unsettled. And of course, my mom being my mom's like, don't talk like that. And I'm like, no, Mom, I'm good. I'm at a good settled place. I feel good about who I am, where I'm at in life. If I don't make it through this, I'm ready. You'll be fine. Just know I love you and that I'm okay. And I didn't really have any fear. I think, again, it was because I was completely ignorant to what I was facing. But I also look at that as a blessing now. So, the last thing I remember, they take me off to pre-op, do the countdown. I wake up, and I vaguely remember that first wake up, but I remember them telling me that I had to go back in tomorrow, and that it was much worse than what they thought it was. And so that began the whole process of infectious disease, wound care. Come to find out, it had tunneled. I had a very aggressive strain of necrotizing fasciitis called actinomyces, which is one of the strongest and most resistant to treatment strains that you can have. It had tunneled and eaten my flesh 30 centimeters up. So they initially had to do a 7-inch excision and then tunnel out all the dead tissue and infection 30 centimeters up. So you can imagine the open wound that I had. That was the first trip to the operating room, and I would have to do 10 by the time it was over.
Wow.
The first 3-4 were debridements, but the other ones were because it was so large. Wound care was not comfortable doing bedside dressings until we got it to a more manageable size, which I'm super thankful, because the first time we had to do a bedside wound dressing, I didn't know pain like that even existed. So I'm glad that they were my advocates and said, we can't do this to this girl. We've got to get it more manageable before we transition her over to bedside changes. So like I said, the first 4 were more so debridements and making sure there was no new infection and that everything was cleared out. But the others, even though I had to go fully under, they were more to do the wound care part of it. And then, of course, the infectious disease got involved, and I had to have the big guns of antibiotics, clindamycin, vicamycin. Then they transitioned me to penicillin.
Had any septic signs or anything? Had you gone septic at that point?
They told me if I had waited 24 more hours, I would not have lived because I was already developing sepsis. They basically told me I got there in the nick of time, and it was also a very good thing that I was not able to like press on the bump or anything, because they said there was a pretty good chance where it was located, it probably would have gotten in my bloodstream. Mm-hmm. So those 2 things, I think, are the reason I'm still here, and it didn't escalate even worse. And they did also tell me that had my spread been external instead of internal, I more than likely would have lost my left leg at the hip.
Wow.
Which you can imagine 30 centimeters, if you can imagine the damage it would have done externally instead of
Right.
tunneling, up inward. But I was in the hospital for 28 days. Um, I had the most amazing care team from, the OBGYN surgeon that did my surgeries, from the wound care team, my infectious disease doctor, the nurses. I mean, even down to the nutrition staff. Everybody just treated me just with such compassion and grace. It was such a blessing, and I'm super thankful for the knowledge that the doctors had, because I'm actually in a small town in Tennessee, in Bristol. The hospital's not that big. And you hear these stories of people going and the doctors just don't have a clue. So I was super, super thankful that they were not only able to identify the possibility, but, treat it with such a sense of urgency. Because I do believe that's the difference in me being alive or not.
So with your wound, I'm assuming that you had to have a wound vac.
They did try wound vac, but where it was located, because the incision ran along the left side of my labia up to my fupa, so there was no real place to get good suction. So unfortunately, they put it on and it lasted for 2 days, and then they had to take me back to the OR to unpack and then reapply it. The second day, it malfunctioned. So that they knew that they were not going to be able to sustain it, but they put it on a total of 3 times, and luckily that helped get the wound smaller to transition me to bedside dressing changes.
Did they talk to you about any possible reconstructive surgery or anything since in that area?
They did not. I don't think that was one of their concerns at the time, because I feel like they were trying to shield me from things that I didn't need to be consumed with at that time to keep my spirits up. It wasn't until I got out of the hospital and started my at-home recovery that I really started learning about necrotizing fasciitis, the strain I had, exactly how bad it was. And I'm actually thankful that they didn't bombard me with that. But I think maybe some people would have considered reconstruction. Me personally, I was just lucky to be alive. I mean, obviously, a woman doesn't want to have, like a deformed lady bits.
Right.
But for me, I was just lucky that I was, one, alive, and two, that I still had both legs. So, if I had to settle out of court for, you know what I mean?
What you
For,
had, what you got
yeah, for what,
versus
for what I went home with, I can't complain. I mean, obviously at the beginning, I kind of went through those emotions, and, part of my confidence was rattled, and, you worry about, oh my God, am I ever going to be intimate with somebody again and be able to be comfortable? But the one thing that I gained from NF was that doesn't matter. That's background noise. That's window dressings. The quality of my life is not contingent upon whether or not I'm able to be intimate with somebody. It's about what I do with my time here. And I'm thankful that I was able to gain a sense of gratitude and really understand what is important in my life through this process.
um, how did you have to go through any physical therapy or anything?
I did not have to go through physical therapy other than like retraining my body. Being in a hospital bed for a month, and I was restricted to the bed about 80% of the time, and I had to have a catheter. I mean, I even had to use a bedpan 80% of the time. So being confined to a hospital bed for 28 days, obviously I lost a lot of stamina and strength, and I went into the hospital at 430 pounds. So I'm thankful that I had a lot of ability to carry my weight, that I was able to bring that home with me. But at the same time, I had to, it was difficult. I had to like recondition myself. I was not used to walking 10 steps and being completely out of breath and feeling like my knees were giving out. So I had to kind of just recondition myself at home. But no, I didn't actually have to have any physical therapy.
So, what was it like returning home for the first time?
It was scary because even though I was ready to get out of the hospital, you develop a certain level of comfort, or at least I did. You know, you rely on the people checking on you. You know that if you need help, you just hit a button. And I knew that I had a long road ahead, and I knew that home health was going to be coming in 2 times a day. I was going home on a PICC line, and I was going to have to do IV penicillin. I had to go through 80 bags before I came off my PICC line. And like I said, I'd never even been in the hospital before this, so it was all so new and overwhelming. And my mom, she was not, she only had one good arm, and that was her left arm, which is not her dominant arm. And I'm thinking, I don't know how this is going to work. I couldn't even go to the restroom by myself. I couldn't shower. And because of the packaging and all that, it was, when I was initially taking 4 rolls of 4 feet packing gauze. So that's 16 feet of packing gauze, if that gives you any, idea of how big my wound was. So, and I'm an independent person, so it was very mentally challenging for me because I didn't want to feel like a burden to my mom, who was already dealing with her own struggle, because I'm used to taking care of her.
Right.
So that was, I think, the hardest part for me was just losing my independence and having to feel like a burden. It humbles you when you're not able to get up and go to the restroom by yourself. It humbles you when you have to go for months without a stand-up shower. So that was the physical part. I thought, obviously there was pain with the wound changes, but the physical part was pretty black and white. It's follow these instructions, do these things, and we'll get there as we come. But the mental part and the emotional part isn't so easy. So I struggled with that, I think, far more than the physical recovery.
Do you feel that you suffer from PTSD from this?
Oh, absolutely. The first year, I was like, I felt like, oh my God, my wound closed in a like, they were shocked how fast my wound closed. They told me 8 months to a year, closed out just over 4 months. No complications, which they were like prepping me for all kinds of complications because, like I said, I was 430 pounds. They had diagnosed me with diabetes. They also diagnosed me with hyperplasia of the uterus. So I had all these things that were against me. But through the grace and mercy of God, I got through that with no complications. And I had lost 60 pounds. And I was just like, oh, yeah, this has been a great thing that's happened to me because I've taken control of my health. And then fast forward to April of 2021, I got a kidney stone and a UTI at the same time. And it clipped me at the ankles because I wasn't prepared to go back to the war zone.
Right.
I wasn't prepared to go back to the hospital and be back in that emergency room and go back through the IVs and the blood work. And it, like, the flashbacks. I mean, not to mention that I was so sick with the kidney stone. It was 4 millimeters, and I had a really bad UTI. In fact, I had so much infection in my body that they had to put a stent in to prevent the kidney stone from breaking loose and releasing it. So I was just, they couldn't do anything to alleviate the nausea. So between being so physically sick and then all that coming back on me, I was not prepared. It was literally like the dam broke that at that time. And I have been in a dark depression since then. Over a year, I've been dealing with really bad anxiety, PTSD, the worst depression I've ever been in my life. And like I said, the physical part, they tell you to take the meds, you do the walking, you follow these instructions, and, it works out pretty well. But there's no set of rules to follow for the emotional and the mental part that it takes. And I've always considered myself a fairly logical person. So to have all these irrational fears that now seem to be the center of my thought process, one pisses me off because I don't like anything to control my life. And I certainly don't want to be controlled by fear, but I haven't gotten to a place yet where I've been able to overcome it and silence that. I'm hopeful because I know that if I've been through what I've been through and I'm still standing, I know that I have the capability to get past this. And I firmly believe in my faith, and I don't think God brought me this far to leave me here. But there's no easy, instruction manual or doctor's orders or just follow these steps to get past this part of it.
Right. I agree with you on that. Have you spoke to anybody or reached out to anybody to?
Yeah. After I had the UTI and the kidney stone, and I felt myself come unhinged. And I felt the sense of dread and hopelessness, and I said, this is dangerous. Because I have battled anxiety and depression my whole life. So I know what that territory feels like when you don't have a sense of hope. So I have an amazing primary care physician who put me in touch with a mental health liaison that said, hey, if you need anything, because they anticipated me, and I'm like, they anticipated that struggle, and I was just in denial. So every time they checked on me, I'm like, no, I'm fine. I'm great. We're rocking it. And then I had to call them and say, last week when I said I was great, well, this week, not so much.
Right.
So I got into therapy. So I've been in therapy for over a year now. And I've been...
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, that's okay. I was just going to say therapy's a great thing. But I still find that it's difficult talking to someone that can't understand this because so few people are truly affected by this, which is one of the reasons I'm so thankful for the group that you guys have. Coming across that has made a huge difference in my recovery because I felt like I was losing my mind. I thought I should be over this. It's been a year. What's my problem? I didn't realize that this was an ongoing recovery. I thought, okay, my wound's closed. I was on oral antibiotics for a year and a half. So I thought once all that's over, hey, it's all good. Great. We made it. And that's just not the case. And, you have people in your life that try their best to relate and be there for you, but they just can't understand it. So to have the group where there's actual people that know exactly what it's like to be, like me over 2 years out and still be having such a hard time getting my groove back, it's so refreshing. And it's like, it feels like somebody's literally touching you saying, you are not alone. There are other humans that have gone through this exact thing. And no, you don't have to be on a timeline. No, you don't have to feel bad that you don't have stamina. No, you don't have to feel bad that you're still scared. It's just made a huge, huge difference. So I thank you guys for having that group for us.
Well, thank you. Most people have to recover at their own time, at their own pace, and anxiety and PTSD, there's no deadline on it. It can show its ugly face anytime. Like you, a year after, it could have been 5 years. But I'm a firm believer in getting help, talking to someone, because they're able to not necessarily understand like you were talking about, but help you with some coping mechanisms to deal with it when you start feeling you're being dragged back out to the center of the lake.
Absolutely. And that's been the one thing that therapy has done for me, is it's allowed me to regain control of my thought process. Mm-hmm. Whereas before, I just felt like I was stuck in a reel, and it's helped me use coping skills to like be able to breathe myself through a panic attack, or kind of reassess how my thoughts are going in my head. And that makes a difference when you feel like you're, caught in a revolving door, being able to stop it for a moment and put a leg out and say, okay, let me get my bearings. Okay. And then make another step. That makes a big difference, because when you feel like you're just stuck and you're tied down by an anchor and no matter what you do, nothing's going to change, that's a very sad, lonely, hopeless feeling. So therapy has really been key in giving me coping skills for that and helping me use other techniques like journaling, just as simple as, you know, stop and pick something you can smell, pick something you can touch, pick something you can taste. Um, that's, you think it's, you think, oh, well, how can that possibly work? But it does. Um,
It does. It helps bring you back to the here and now. Not it pulls you away from that train of thought where your brain's trying to go.
exactly. It helps you ground yourself, and refocus. And for a long time, when after the UTI and kidney stone, and I went into such a dark depression, I couldn't stop my train of thought. Everything was dread. Everything was waiting for the next ball to drop. That everything was in my head saying, no matter what you do, it's going to be bad. So therapy helped me kind of be able to hush that up and say, no, look at where I am today. Just because it's not the picture I painted in my head doesn't mean it's not still progress. I had gotten to a point where I felt like I wasn't allowed to complain. I had this almost toxic attitude of gratitude. And I say that because I was so super thankful and blessed that I thought if I complained or whined and cried and moaned, that was disrespectful. I thought it was disrespectful of my faith and to what God had pulled me through. I thought it was showing, like I didn't appreciate the fact that I was alive. And I had to realize that it's okay for me to be upset that this happened to me. It's okay for me to be pissed off that it's been 2 years and I still don't feel like myself. It's okay for me to be frustrated that I still have, um, foggy brain from all the times I was put under anesthesia. I didn't give myself permission to feel the bad thoughts. And so when everything, you know, unhinged, I was just swallowed by sadness and loneliness and feeling like no matter how positive I am, no matter how many, you know, no matter what 1,200 calorie diet I follow, no matter how many times I push myself to walk a mile, I'm just going to end up sick and nothing's going to work. I had gotten to that level of defeat. So therapy helped me kind of like hit the reset button and say, it's okay to feel whatever you're feeling because you're a human and you've gone through a human experience. And what my body went through was something really severe. And I never wanted to admit that. I never wanted to admit that what I went through was so extremely difficult, not only physically on me, but mentally and emotionally. I just never wanted to admit it, and I never wanted to face it because if I did, then it was real. And I always try to stay programmed that, it's not as bad as they sound, but it is. And you have to own that. You have to embrace it and realize, because that's what gives you the true gratitude that you've made it through it, and it gives you the confidence to get up tomorrow and try.
Yes, it does. One of our other fellow survivors, Chris Gordon, he has a podcast. He preaches, and it's a good thing, the attitude of gratitude. That's his philosophy. He will stop you and tell you, I've got a marker. It's just a marker, but I'm thankful. And it is. If you stop and think about it, if you didn't have the marker and you needed it, there's no
And I totally get that because prior to NF, I took for granted taking a shower. I took for granted being able to go in my bathroom and lock my door and have privacy when I use the restroom. I took for granted being able to eat something other than bland hospital food. I took so much for granted, and I put so much of my energy into stuff that has no bearing on the quality of my life. It does nothing to make me a better person. When you're laying alone in a hospital bed and all you hear is the beep of the machines, you really think about what's important. And I never thought about, people talking about me or drama. I thought about, if this is my time, am I at peace? Or how can I make myself better if I get out of here? I thought about, okay, what's my accountability in this? What was my role? What mistakes did I make? And I had to face the music on that. I had to realize that I had neglected my health. I put myself in a position to be an undiagnosed diabetic, which was fuel to the fire of the infection, because when I went in the hospital, my sugar was over 400. That amplified it, God knows how much. I had to take accountability for ignoring my symptoms. When it first started getting bad, I should have not been stubborn, and I should have gone and sought medical attention, and I didn't. And I had to reflect on that. So, that's the positive takeaway that I take from NF, and I feel like it truly is a blessing, because now I put my energy where I feel it counts. I don't waste time on background noise. And even though I have been in a dark depression for over a year, I still wake up thankful. Days may not go the way I want. Yes, it's very hard to live every day in a depression and not know the answers or the magic recipe to get out of it. But no matter what, I feel a sense of appreciation that I'm alive, that I don't give up, that I wake up every day trying to be the best version of Jen that I can be. And prior to NF, that was not how I lived.
Well, you got to remember, and I feel like you're there now, but you weren't in the beginning, is you're human. You have feelings, you have emotions, you're entitled to express those. Bottle them up, it will take you to a darker place quicker. And
I
what
agree.
you were saying about dismissing, you can feel the darkness, you just dismissed it and went about it. That's when people need to reach out for that, because you got to feel that to process it, so that it doesn't build up like it did for you.
I learned many years ago that you have to feel it in order to heal it. But for some reason, I didn't allow myself. I felt like if I took that on top of the physical, it was too much. So I just kind of shoved it back. That was
That's
a
what most
mistake I
people do.
made. That
Most
was a
people do
mistake I
that.
made. Looking back on it now, I wish I would have found the balance. And when people were reaching out to me saying, "Hey, would you like to talk to somebody?" I wish I had been more proactive in my mental health and not just laser focused on the physical aspect.
For
Because
sure.
I mean, not to toot my own horn, but I kicked ass on the physical part. But it costed me much more in the long run, because it sent me in a downward spiral, neglecting the mental and emotional part.
I'm going to change the subject on you. How did your mom cope with all of this? How, from what you know?
God bless my mom. She is not. She's an amazing woman, but she's not the most nurturing. But this brought out such a caregiver in her that I never experienced in my whole life. Like I said, she was working with one good arm and one kind of bad arm. But, and we had home health coming out twice a day to do the wound part, because she physically wasn't able to do that. But aside from that, she was up every morning making me breakfast, making sure I took my meds, helping me with my PICC line, help giving me the hoe bath or the bird bath because I couldn't take a shower, and, you get a new level of closeness with, whether it's your mother, your spouse, whoever it is, when they have to like do certain things for you.
Mm-hmm.
And that really like humbled me a lot, because it always been the other way around, like me taking care of her. So to see her step up and never complain or make me feel bad for that gave me a new appreciation for her and our relationship. And I mean, I couldn't have made it through it without my mom.
Sounds like your relationship may have taken a step up to the next level through this.
It absolutely did. And my mom won't mind me saying this. We actually didn't have the greatest relationship throughout earlier years. But in 2016, she was diagnosed with breast cancer stage 1. And that was a wake-up call for both of us. And she's my only living parent. So we kind of realized back then, you only get one life. You're either gonna like dwell on the past and stay stuck on that, or you're gonna let be what has gone and put in an effort to have a relationship with somebody. So we were already rekindling and rebuilding a relationship, but this really cemented the fact that we can both count on one another in the hardest of circumstances. So it's been a blessing. And, I have a community of support through my Beauty Within by Jen business page. I had people from all over the country sending flowers, cards, praying. I wouldn't have made it out of the hospital without that. I wouldn't have. I know that, because the times that I'd sit there and just feel like, oh, I can't do this another day, I'd look over at the windowsill full of flowers and think, I've got people counting on me to get out of this hospital bed. I've got people that are praying for me. They're not giving up on me. I can't give up on myself. So to the Beauty Within by Jen community, I have to thank them so much. And I have to thank my mom, because without my mom being my caregiver and being there for me, I just wouldn't have been able to get through this alone. And, I was really, really blessed with an amazing staff of medical professionals from Bristol Regional Medical Center. Like I said, from the surgeon to the wound care, from infectious disease to the nurses, the assistants, everybody treated me with such compassion. They were so patient. The days where I just wanted to sit and cry, they didn't make me feel bad about it. They just let me be a baby. They were just so, so loving and, compassionate. I just know that they made all the difference in my recovery. So a big thank you to everybody that prayed for me, everybody that helped me. I just couldn't have done it without all of them.
Absolutely. And just so everyone knows, I don't have the link to Jen's makeup line, but I will put it in the description of this so that if you're interested in checking it out, you'll have the link to go to it.
I don't really do makeup on there much anymore. I've been in a depression, so I haven't really been active. I'm hoping to get back on there. But the heart of that page was really humor and just cutting up and having a good time. But like I said, the community of people there, they're amazing. So if you want to check it out, feel free, because I think they're the best humans on the planet.
Well, Jen, I'm a Southerner like you. I know how we are. We often try to mask things with humor.
Yep. Turn every tragedy into a belly laugh. Yep,
Yes.
That's what I've always done. But, it's kind of hard to be the funny girl when you're laid up in a hospital bed with a catheter. But those people never wavered. They never left my side.
Well, I also give a shout out to all of the nurses. Nurses are fabulous. I mean, yeah, I'm sure there are some bad ones, but without nurses, they're on the front line every day.
Yeah. I like I said, they were my angels. I called them my 4 East Angels. They really were the difference. I mean, not to take anything away from the doctors, because obviously they were lifesavers, literally.
Absolutely.
But those nurses and those, CNAs or nursing assistants pulling those 12-hour shifts, coming in and, doing the dirty work, and
not dealing with such nice people sometimes.
Yeah, and
it's difficult.
Even on my worst day, I tried to remember these people are here breaking their back to help this experience be better for me. So, not to toot my own horn, but I took pride in treating them well, because Lord knows they were helping me get through the worst situation I've ever felt in my life. So,
but yes, the doctors are saviors. I do not dismiss them or what they do by any means. I just give a bigger shout out to the nurses, because they're hands-on. They have to deal with.
They're the caretakers. They're right. The ones that are really there.
And they make sure the doctors know what's going on, so they know
exactly. I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think they're the heartbeat of the whole medical field. So, and I've remained friends with some of the nurses that took care of me. I mean, you're in a hospital 28 days. You grow to care about these people, and they grow to care about you, and they're invested in your recovery. So you want to get out and make them proud. So, like I said, from the nurses and the entire staff that I dealt with, to the, my flock with the Beauty Within by Jen team, and my mom and my family, there's no way, without God's mercy and grace and all those people that I had, that I would have ever made it through it. And I recognize that.
For sure. I was blessed that one of the nurses who saw me being transported was a girl I went to school with. And to this day, I call her my guardian angel, because she was on her way home and she just dropped everything and took over my whole case and took care of me and made sure I was taken care of. So, yes, she was my guardian angel for sure.
I had a whole flock of angels at Bristol, so I understand completely.
Well, Jen, I appreciate you being here sharing your experience with us.
I really am honored. I thank you so much, and I appreciate what you guys do for not only survivors but the family members of those that have survived or not survived. Just having the NFF and the support page on Facebook has made a tremendous difference in my recovery. So I know it's helping other people. So I really am honored to be here to bring awareness and share my story. Thank you.
Thank you, and I appreciate that because we're all volunteers, and that's what we do it for. Just to know we're helping.
Well, you've definitely helped me be able to know that I'm not alone, and you've helped me realize that I don't have to be as tough on myself as I had been, and that there are other people out there that can actually relate to what I'm going through. So thank you for that.
Well, Jen, if you want to hang out backstage, I'll be back there in just a few minutes.
All righty.
I'd like to thank Jen for being here and telling her story and experience. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, and I hope to see you next time for another episode of The Steep. Please remember to be kind and